Requiem Sanctuary was a beautiful stately home, with many rooms of different shapes and sizes. Each room had a character of its own which suited the mood Requiem was in at the time. The drawing room was a place between relaxation and contemplation. Depending on what was going through Requiem's mind, the music would change to accentuate the feeling. Presently, the music was soft and relaxing. Requiem was far too tired to be anything else. Suddenly the tone of the music changed to an uplifting roar. The orchestra rose to full ferocity as the bass drum shook the very fabric of the building. Sipping the last of his tea, Requiem said calmly, "One day I'm going to develop an entrance like that." "Yes," replied a bearded old man shortly from behind Requiem. "And your tune will no doubt be O Fortuna, if today was anything to go by." "You could be right," replied Requiem airily. "It is an awe-inspiring song, don't you think, Erebus?" "I am more concerned by what it inspires. Chaos and devastation are not what keep us at peace with the Hafuna and the cosmos," replied Erebus somberly. "Okay, I admit, I shouldn't turn the world in on itself every time I find the Hafuna shocking or irritating. But you didn't see this guy. He should have been committed, and yet no one else seemed to realise this. It was because of this woeful lack of insight that I needed to disintegrate them." The music returned to a calm serenade as Erebus materialised a seat before the fire and continued to speak. "There are some 6 billion people on Earth, Requiem. With us numbering in just the thousands, we are the minority, and we can't go dictating what is right and wrong. We must maintain peaceful relations, or it may be our world that feels the fury of the Hafuna's might, and, unlike us, they cannot so easily undo what they have done." Requiem had not looked at Erebus since his entrance, and kept his gaze fixed on the fire from the brim of his teacup as he spoke with a dark conviction. "We could change it so we're not in the minority, you know." "Yes, many of our younger generations think that way," said Erebus in a thoughtful tone as he sat down slowly. "But very few of us know how to control our power, and fewer still have enough control to wage outright war. The Hafuna were not given their name lightly. Their ingenuity increases the more trying their circumstances become. They have determination and unity in the face of adversity. With Westgate and Eastgate continually feuding, and Southgate always pulling in its own direction, the strength of our unity is nowhere near the equal of theirs. With such great numbers and this force of will behind them, I fear they will triumph over our diluted abilities in the end." Erebus leaned forwards to stare thoughtfully at the fire. The way the flames seemed to dance and sway to the music was entrancing, even to him. Pulling himself out of his deep contemplation, he continued, "Yes, I know how maintaining the balance sounds like something that belongs in a story, but maintain it we must, and maintain it you will." Requiem's face dropped along with the arm holding his teacup, drawing its soothing liquid away from his lips. He found Erebus's comment tiresome. Leaning back in his chair and looking up to the ceiling with closed eyes, he replied, "Me, huh? And all I wanted to do was listen to a bit of music." Erebus grinned as he nodded, still enchanted by the fire. The pace of the music sped. Voices gave way to drums, and, at its climax, something shot out of the flames towards Requiem. Leaping like a scalded cat, he flipped majestically over the chair, teacup still in hand, with not a drop spilt, and watched as the object landed in his seat with a thud. Requiem straightened his suit before picking up the object. 2 demonic hands made of gold with long bony fingers clasped the ends of a glass canister. The hands were so large, and the fingers so long that their tips met to form a cage around the glass, allowing for only a broken view of whatever was inside. Requiem peered and sipped his tea as he tipped the container from side to side, watching its thick, red contents slide between the gold fingers. Continuing to adhere to their silent rules of engagement by avoiding eye contact, Erebus asked Requiem, "What do you know of vampires?" Leaning back in his chair and speaking with a knowing air, he added, "Although they no longer go by that name, they now use the name Comedo stricturus. Comedo being Latin for eat, and strictura for mass of iron." Requiem looked up from the canister to glance at Erebus before returning to his chair, unmoved. "I'm sketchy on them under any guise." "So you should be," said Erebus with a smile. "While anonymity has been a vampire trait for the last few hundred years, it wasn't always so. Let me give you a little history lesson." Erebus produced a hot drink and sat back in his chair. Requiem glanced at him again from the corner of his eye. Then, deciding to accept that he was increasingly encountering madness in people, he sat back and summoned forth more tea in his cup. Each drink caused the fire to die as if the heat of the flames themselves had been snatched to make them, before once again bursting back into life. The death and rebirth of the fire for the second time was the cue Erebus needed to begin his account. If he knew anything, he knew that when Requiem had a full cup of tea in his drawing room, his mind was quiet and one could retain his focus until the tea ran out. Comedo stricturus are much like us, human, but different enough to not quite be called human. Erebus left a long pause as he sipped his drink and stared deep into the fire. He wanted Requiem to linger on the point that they were all human in one way or another. This was a crucial lesson he prayed Requiem would remember. The crumbling of a log prompted Erebus to continue. "My fellow counsellor, Lord Volt, confidently tells me that the Comedo stricturus have a genetic mutation, which means they have a significant iron deficiency. As we now know, blood is rich in iron. Thousands of years ago, this was not common knowledge, but somehow a parent ended up giving their suffering child some blood to drink, and the secret to their survival was unlocked." Erebus sniffed and backed up inside the chair before continuing authoritatively. "It was simply survival. Blood was probably the richest source of iron these people had available, so perhaps we should not judge them." It was now Erebus's turn to peer from the brim of his cup as he watched Requiem shudder discreetly. Returning his gaze to the fire, Erebus filled in the other pieces of the vampire puzzle. "They have two further mutations. One makes their skin very susceptible to sunlight. It is not as though they burst into flame, but their skin feels as if it is burning and they blister." Requiem nodded to show that he could see how the vampire myth sprang from the reality of genetics. "And the other?" he asked. "Yes, the other." Erebus took in a deep breath. "Well, all Comedo stricturus are men, and the other mutation they carry is a second Y chromosome. Their veins are literally filled with testosterone. It makes them incredibly strong, but also short-tempered and violent. It has an upside, believe it or not, as they are also very protective of their loved ones. But in summary, you have a very large, strong, short-tempered man with violent tendencies, coupled with a dislike for sunlight and a need for blood." Shaking his head, Erebus spoke somberly. "Combine this with our own ability to control matter, albeit to a lesser extent thanks to all that testosterone, and you can see how in an age characterised by the survival of the fittest, the vampires of the day ruled supreme, killing all in their way and building great empires. They weren't quite the equal of Rome or Egypt. These had a civility and sophistication the Comedo stricturus don't have, but much of Russia and parts of Asia were dark and barbaric enough for them to flourish." By now, Requiem was on the edge of his seat, staring into the fire, passing the container from hand to hand. "So what happened to them?" For the first time, Erebus turned to face Requiem. "Times change. It's no longer survival of the fittest. where the success or loss of an individual can bring about great change. It's about civilizations, law and order. The vampires had to adapt or face being wiped out by Rome, England, or, today, America. During their reign, they amassed vast fortunes and real estate. They changed their name and their ways and are now the silent financial powerhouses behind many multinational companies and government campaigns. If anything, they are more powerful today than they have ever been, although few know of them. Now their battles are won by their lawyers, not their muscle. Backing up in his chair once again to look at the fire, Erebus added wistfully, "Yes, you could say that anger management courses have done wonders for them." Holding the canister up to the fire, Requiem's voice betrayed his growing impatience. "So where do I come into it, and this canister of what is no doubt blood?" Erebus was not concerned by Requiem's tone. He still had half a cup of tea to keep him caged. Erebus pressed on. "Today's peace originated at a time when my generation was young, when all the magical races, for want of a better term, formed an alliance with the Hafuna in order to preserve all, and long has it reigned. We now reside in the Four Gates and its satellites, shielding ourselves from the Hafuna. We hide because of our ability, and, as I said, we are by far the minority. In return, the governments of the world ensure that we are not disturbed and are allowed free passage throughout the world." Erebus nodded as if in agreement with the decisions of old. "All in all, it's a good deal for everyone. However, many of the younger ones, such as yourself, don't see this, nor appreciate the strength of the Hafuna. They are blinded by their own convictions. Some feel that it is the Hafuna that should walk in the shadows, and we who should dominate the land. It would now appear that a Comedo Strictura has decided that living off iron supplements in a vast, dark castle is not what he wants anymore, and not what his people deserve." "So you want me to dispose of him then?" Requiem said with reserved eagerness as he shook the container. "We have no desire to upset the Comedo Stricturus. We just want you to give the one that goes by the name of Talis our gift of this canister and see what he's up to. He may open up to you given that you share some of his chaotic tendencies and are both from the South Gate." Standing up to take his leave, Erebus spoke in a lighter, more whimsical tone. "You will find Talis in Mongolia. Just look for the biggest, scariest building you've ever seen and pop in to say hello." As Erebus started to walk away, he remembered something and turned to Requiem. "Oh, just so you know, they don't have fangs. They're not big coffin sleepers, and some really do fly. Report back to the Ivory Tower when you're done. Perhaps then you can make that off entrance you've been planning. Oh, and take some friends. Road trips are so much more fun when a sneeze can kill." One of the walls of the drawing room took on a watery hue as Erebus walked towards it. Before disappearing, he gave Requiem a sideways glance. "This could be a turning point in your life. Be warned that if you make the wrong turn, 6 billion people may have something to say about it. Have fun." With a smile, Erebus left through the watercolour, leaving Requiem in a turmoil of pessimism and shock. Gazing into the container, he wondered for a moment what Erebus had meant when he'd said that this could be a turning point in his life. Have fun? He was always so cheery about such shocking matters, Requiem muttered to himself whilst watching the blood drip slowly down the inside of the container. Oh well, onwards and upwards, I suppose. I might even finally meet one of those blood-sucking lawyers you always hear about. Without further ado, he disintegrated the canister and, with far less elegance than Erebus, blasted away a wall of the drawing room and set off for the marble courtyard.